truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which, under no circumstances, should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily upset.
Hey guys, what's up? So I'm here with a top 15 list for you. I'm gonna try and keep these fucking speaking segments pretty short. About 2 years ago I did a list, about 2.5 years ago, I did a list of my top 10 favorite slasher films, and I kind of want to start updating some of my older lists. Very similar to how I update my most disturbing movies list every year. I'm going to try and update my 15 favorite slasher films, and I did a video on my favorite zombie films like 3 or 4 years ago that I need to update. But I figured I'd update this one first, and let me just say right now, as I was editing kind of the transitions, titles, finding clips, finding the trailers for these movies and everything, all of that time, while doing all of that, I rewatched Terra Firma, and I essentially watched the entire director's cut of Terra Firma, which is 2 hours and 4 minutes, and it took me 2 hours and 4 minutes to compile all these trailers and edit everything together, because I kind of wanted to do things a little differently. So, yeah, these are essentially my 15 favorite slasher films, in order from, like, my 15th least favorite to my number 1 favorite slasher film. There might be some surprises on here, there might be some expected things on here, but most of all, I'm just gonna have some bit of fun with this. So, let's just fucking kick this thing off with number 15.
Innocent travelers trapped in a mysterious house, tortured by a malevolent force.
Starting off at the number 15 spot, we have Ryan Nicholson's Gutterballs from 2008. Gutterballs is essentially a tribute to 80s slasher films as well as 70s rape and revenge films. The film centers on 2 bowling teams, and they have a bit of a dispute. Their game gets interrupted, and the one employee at this bowling alley offers to let them come in tomorrow night and, you know, play after hours and finish their game as long as they don't do anything too fucking stupid. And one of the members of the kind of team you're supposed to root for, she is brutally raped, gang raped, mind you, by the opposing team. She was raped with a bowling pin, might I add. And essentially, after they all come back, they get locked inside the place, and there's a guy wearing a bowling ball bag on his head, going around killing people. It's an immensely violent, super sexually explicit, overly profane, that, I'm not even joking, fuck is said about 600 times in this movie that some people might say is trying a little too hard, it's overly offensive, it's just not entertaining, and others might absolutely adore this film. I adore Gutterballs, and I'm still waiting for Gutterballs 2. I mean, Ryan Nicholson, I actually messaged him directly on Facebook, and asked him about it, and he told me that he's still working on Gutterballs 2, working on the kind of full final cut of the film, so we're gonna have to wait for that. But yeah, the first Gutterballs, because it's a bowling-themed slasher film, and it's easily one of the most brutal slasher films I have ever seen, ever. Also one of the most brutal horror comedies I've ever seen, like, Jesus. But yeah, at the 15th spot sits Gutterballs.
If they decide they don't like you, watch out.
At the number 14 spot, we have a modern slasher film. Probably one of my favorite modern slasher films, one of my favorite home invasion films. It's You're Next. You're Next is a film that kind of came out. I saw trailers for it, and I thought, and as much as I wanted to see it, I wasn't able to catch a screening of it, but I saw trailers for it, and I kind of expected it to be a kind of cookie-cutter, basic slasher film that was just kind of maybe average at best. And I came out of it with this really stylized, well-made, honestly, pretty well thought-out home invasion slasher film essentially about a family coming together for this kind of big family dinner, and like all these, all these kids, they're all adults now, and they're all married, and like one was married to like an artist, and like the mother doesn't approve, and a lot of like conflicting interests and tensions, and then suddenly, while they're having dinner, somebody is shot with an arrow through the fucking window, and three guys in animal masks essentially attempt to raid the house and kill everybody inside. It reminded me very much of Hotline Miami, the video game Hotline Miami, which was heavily inspired by the film Drive. It has a very synth-heavy soundtrack, and it's very violent, and I really, really, really enjoy You're Next. I think that's really all I have to say about that.
Maniac, you can lock your doors, but you can't lock the madman out of your mind.
Next is probably my favorite Killer Kids movie. It's a little film by the title of Bloody Birthday. For those of you who've never seen Bloody Birthday, I would highly recommend you check it out. I remember catching this film on Netflix streaming a few years back and thinking it was really interesting. If I have one problem with the film, it's the fact that with the current Blu-ray and DVD release, they make it out to be like this really sick, fucked up movie, when in actuality, it's not really that gory of a film. It's not really that sexually explicit or violent. It's entertaining. There's some decent violence in there. There's some decent nudity in there. Really, I like this film because the personalities of the kids are very interesting. Some of the kills are really well done. It's got some good atmosphere. I really, really love Bloody Birthday. It's a film I try to watch every year on my birthday because it's a movie I really enjoy. That and Happy Birthday to Me. But it's essentially about these kids, 3 kids that are born on the same day during a solar eclipse, and then years later, on like their 13th birthday, they decide, hey, let's start killing people, and they just kind of start killing anybody they don't like or anybody that gets in their way. It's a good movie. I really, really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend you check it out.
Some say she spoiled her boys. Some say she drove them mad. No one who found out has lived to tell.
Next, we have The Burning, the film that a lot of people claimed it was a Friday the 13th kind of ripoff, when in actuality it was in production before Friday the 13th, and it's actually inspired by the Cropsey urban legend, which turned out to be kind of a real... It turned out Cropsey was kind of a real person. The Burning is essentially about this kind of, I don't want to say janitor, maybe caretaker at a summer camp, and these kids play a prank on him, and he ends up being horribly burned all over. And after being horribly burned, the skin grafts they attempt to give him just don't want to work. So he's essentially sent back out into the world as this horrifically burned, deformed freak. And he goes back to the summer camp and starts killing off the teenagers at this camp one by one, whether or not they were responsible for his disfigurement. When they go on this kind of canoe trip to some island out in the middle of this lake. It's a really good movie. It's got good atmosphere. The characters are likable. The killer is really interesting. It's violent as hell. It was on the Video Nasties list. It's good. It even features, I cannot remember the guy's name, but the fucking bald guy from Seinfeld. He is in this movie, and this was like, some 15 years before Seinfeld even started to air. Maybe 10, 15 years before Seinfeld aired. So it's interesting to see him so young in this violent, dark slasher film. I really like the film, and I genuinely think it's a pretty overlooked film when it comes to... I mean, I know it has this big cult following today, but I think it's decently overlooked when it comes to 80s slashers. Definitely overlooked when compared to, like, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. But, yeah, at the number... What is this, like, fucking... 14, 12? Number 12 spot, I think. It's The Burning.
In this town on Valentine's Day, everybody loses their heart.
Roses are red, violets are blue. One is dead, and so are you.
At 11, we have the seasonal slasher film, Silent Night, Deadly Night. A fairly controversial film for its time, because the trailers and advertisements expressly made it 100% clear that the killer was dressed up as Santa Claus, and this scared a lot of kids. It made a lot of members of the PTA boycott, and it resulted in this film kind of being cut heavily and censored and forgotten for so long. Silent Night, Deadly Night is essentially this movie about this kid who sees his parents get murdered by a guy dressed up as Santa Claus, and from then on he has this fear of Santa Claus, and he goes to a orphanage, and a bunch of shit happens, and then as an adult he gets a job at this toy store, and when this toy store their kind of Santa Claus quits his job, they're like, who do we get to be Santa Claus? Oh, how about the fucking orphan kid who's afraid of Santa Claus and Christmas in general? Let's get him to be Santa Claus. And essentially he kind of snaps, because they're like, oh, you're Santa, that means you gotta go give all the presents to the boys and girls. And his grandfather told him that Santa, only gives presents to kids who've been good all year and haven't done a single bad thing, and the rest of them he punishes horribly. And he eventually goes on a killing spree, eventually killing Scream Queen Linnea Quigley by fucking, piercing her on fucking deer antlers that are mounted on a wall. It's crazy. I really love Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's a violent movie. It's sexually explicit. It's got the gore. It's got a pretty decent backstory for the killer, honestly. You honestly feel kind of bad for him. And it's Christmas themed. I love Christmas themed horror movies. I love holiday themed horror movies, even if they aren't that good. This film, on the other hand, I legitimately believe is great.
On the one night they were celebrating New Year's Eve, he was out, ending their life.
So at the number 10 spot, we have this slasher film by the name of Communion, also known as Holy Terror, most famously known as Alice, Sweet Alice. Alice, Sweet Alice is a film I haven't really seen in about a year and a half, so I'm a little shady, I'm a little fuzzy on the details of this film. But essentially, Alice, Sweet Alice is this kind of pretty, decently violent 70s slasher film that is very atmospheric. And it essentially is about these two girls who are, religious. I'm pretty sure they're, twin sisters or something. And one of them ends up being horribly killed. And there's a murderer on the loose killing people in this apartment building that they live in, and people start to think that maybe it's Alice maybe it's, the girl Alice who is going around killing all these people. Maybe she's responsible for her sister's death. And, yeah, that's essentially all I can remember about the film. I remember it being very creepy and pretty fucking violent, and I remember the famous scene where the killer is watching the woman come down the stairs, and he stabs her, and the killer stabs the woman's feet. That scene I always remember being pretty gnarly. But I honestly don't have much else to say about Alice, Sweet Alice. Honestly, I really love that movie, but I honestly have not watched it in a while. I'm probably gonna have to rewatch that one eventually.
Warning: what you will see in the movie Pieces cannot be revealed. Cannot be described.
At the number 9 spot, we have another holiday-themed slasher film that was kind of, I want to say, kind of overshadowed by a film that came out the same year that was based on the same holiday. The film I'm talking about is Slaughter High. Essentially, this nerd in high school, these kids pull a prank on him. It goes horribly wrong, and he ends up horrifically burned and disfigured. After ending up disfigured, 5 years later, he sends out invitations to all of the people who are responsible for this, claiming that there's a high school reunion at the high school, which is now abandoned. They show up, and there's all kinds of stuff there's all kinds of party supplies and stuff, and eventually he kills them all off one by one in various interesting and creative ways. I don't know why I absolutely love Slaughter High. I really don't. I do not know, honestly, at all why I love Slaughter High, but I do love this movie. It's violent, it's quirky, it's weird, it's entertaining, alright? That's all you really want from a slasher film, and that's what you get from Slaughter High. It's an entertaining fucking movie. There's a Blu-ray release coming out soon from Vestron Video, which I'm very excited for that Blu-ray release in particular. Yeah, Slaughter High, which is also known as, I think, like April Fool's Day, again overshadowed by the film that came out the same year, April Fool's Day, because the film is set on April Fool's Day, very similar to the slasher film April Fool's Day, which came out the same year. So April Fool's Day, that slasher film kind of overshadowed it, although that film is also, I would say, fairly kind of underseen and underrated. But, on to the next one.
Marty hasn't forgotten a thing. He's giving them a blast from the past they'll never forget. Marty Ranson is still a dork, but tonight he's getting even.
At the number 8 spot, we have the trauma film Terra Firma. I just said I was watching Terra Firma as I was kind of editing the transitions and stuff, because I kind of wanted to rewatch it. And upon rewatching it, I actually had to change its spot on the list, because originally it was much higher. It wasn't as good as I remembered, but I still absolutely love it. Terra Firma is essentially a slasher film directed by Lloyd Kaufman, and it's about trauma, trying to make a trauma film. And there's a crazed lunatic going around killing people who are involved with the film, and I don't know what to say. It's an absolute clusterfuck of violence and sex and drugs and gross out humor and foul language. It's a typical trauma film, and it's literally just one big trauma film talking about how important independent cinema is, and talking about how kind of mainstream cinema sucks, and that's honestly fucking hilarious. What can I fucking say about this movie? I don't know what else to say. It's hilarious as hell. Like I said, the director's cut with the deleted scenes in it runs for over 2 hours, which is crazy, but I think it stays legitimately hilarious and consistently weird and shocking throughout the whole runtime. And I believe it might be Lloyd Kaufman's best film. Maybe. I might have to rewatch some of the Toxic Avenger films and Class of Nukem High before I can really say for sure, as well as Poultrygeist. But still, Terra Firma is great, and I love it.
This holiday season, prepare to have the stuffing scared out of you.
At the number 7 spot, we have a Spanish horror film, Spanish slasher, from 1982, Pieces. Everybody knows Pieces. I remember a time when Pieces was this lesser-known, obscure cult flick, which that was like, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that Pieces was this really like lesser-known film. Now it has kind of become this huge cult phenomenon, and I love it. Pieces is essentially a movie about this kid who murders his mother for no apparent reason when he's like 10 years old, and then he grows up and starts murdering college students in order to stitch their body parts together. It's weird and really violent. The gore scenes in this film are very well done, and there's just so much going on in this film. I'd have to say that some of the cheesy scenes in this movie are hilarious. A lot of the weird dialogue. I mean, there's literally a scene where this guy is walking like down a sidewalk of the university in the middle of the night, and suddenly this Asian guy jumps out and starts doing kung fu, and the explanation is that he ate some bad chop suey and passed out. And he woke up and attacked the first person he saw, thinking that they attacked him first. That's in this movie. There's so much other weird shit. The twist ending is hilariously just like out of place, and so off the wall and unexpected. I'm mad that I actually spoiled it for myself. I mean, I still absolutely love it, but when I was first interested in seeing the film, I accidentally spoiled the kind of twist ending for myself. Or not a twist ending, but it's kind of surprise ending for myself, which sucks. It's a weird movie. It's weird, funny, cheesy, bad, but at the same time, it's well made and interesting, and I mean, it's still a bad movie, but goddamn is it amazing. Yeah, at the number 7 spot, we got Pieces from 1982.
Never in the history of motion pictures have there been scenes such as these. We caution parents.
At the number 6 spot, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Now, contrary to popular opinion, alright, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this, I think the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie really isn't that amazing. Now, I'm not saying I don't think it's a good movie. I think it's a very good movie. I think it's very important to the history of horror films, and I do think that it definitely has a draw to it. I definitely think it has its place in horror history. Like I said, it has a draw to it, and I still think that it is an immensely interesting and compelling film. That being said, I don't think it's like as balls to the wall, amazing, or violent as anybody makes it out to be. The sequel, on the other hand, is absolutely amazing. A lot of people hate Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 because it took this fairly kind of serious, although I kind of think the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre film was a little bit over the top and a little bit cheesy. Again, don't crucify me for this, but I think the original is a little over the top and a little cheesy at times, and it takes those elements in the kind of, you know, hard to detect, but they're definitely there, elements of dark humor in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then in the sequel, they just took it and made it a balls to the wall, violent, weird horror comedy where now Leatherface and his family are living inside an abandoned amusement park, and Dennis Hopper is a fucking sheriff who is the brother of the wheelchair guy from the original, who wants to get revenge on them. And on top of that, there's a radio DJ who accidentally hears one of the murders live on air. And yeah, if I had to choose one amazing element of this film, it would be Bill Moseley's performance as Chop Top. His performance as Chop Top is amazing, and I think honestly Chop Top is a more entertaining villain, more entertaining, and I honestly think a little more menacing villain than Leatherface, mainly because he just kind of looks creepier than Leatherface. I mean, he's this creepy, gray, plate in his head, Vietnam veteran hippie who scratches at the fucking plate in his head with a heated up coat hanger and eats the pieces of flesh. I think that's a little creepier than a guy that wears somebody's face. Again, I do really like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I do think it's a little overrated, a little overblown, but still, I do appreciate it. The second one, however, is my absolute favorite, and I've also got to say right now that the fourth Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, is absolutely amazing. And if you love bad movies, especially bad horror sequels that are like amazingly awful, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation is where it's at. Like, legit. It's hilarious. That being said, I have nothing else to say about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Again, I'm going to give it a recommendation and move on down the list.
A mother fighting for her child loses it in the worst possible way.
At the number 5 spot, we have the Bob Clark film Black Christmas. I've always really liked Black Christmas. Ever since I saw it some 2 or 3 years ago for the first time, I've always really appreciated the film. And I've always thought it was this pretty creepy movie. And then I got the new Blu-ray from Scream Factory, and I watched it when I got it last December. I watched it in my room with the lights off in the dark, just completely by myself with no distractions. and legitimately a film. There are very few films that have creeped me out as much at least films that I've seen before that I rewatch that have creeped me out more the second time I've seen them than the first time I've seen them. Black Christmas is essentially the slasher film that came out before Halloween, and Halloween kind of stole all of its thunder, although Halloween was a tribute to Black Christmas. What can I say about Black Christmas that hasn't already been said? It's a masterpiece. It's a legitimately frightening and creepy film. The villain, the killer, Billy, is legitimately interesting, and the fact that you know nothing about him makes his character all the more frightening, I would say. The direction of the film is amazing. The film's atmosphere is, like, too good to be true. Like, I can't believe I didn't feel this level of atmosphere and tension and dread before when I watched it the first time. And upon watching it this second time, I realized it's like one of the most frightening and creepy films I had honestly ever seen in my entire life. That being said, this essentially it's about this guy who's living in the attic of a sorority house over Christmas break, and he's kind of killing off members of the sorority one by one. It's a film that is very low on violence. Like there's not a lot of real gore in the film or anything like that, but it's heavy on the atmosphere and dread. If you want a creepy movie, if you want a creepy holiday horror film to watch this holiday season, pick up Black Christmas, because it will legitimately give you chills. On to the next one.
The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
At the fourth spot, we have the film Stage Fright from 1984. Stage Fright is this Italian kind of giallo slasher, essentially about this crew that are working on this stage musical, and there's a killer loose in this theater, and this killer is killing off members of the production crew one by one, while dressed up as the kind of main antagonist of the musical. I never thought a film could make an owl, like, legitimately creepy, but it did. Stage Fright is a pretty creepy film overall. It's very violent. The violence is really good. Really, like, the gore is very well done. It's atmospheric, it's interesting, and the ending is surreal as hell and a little confusing, and I really like it. I don't know what else to say about fucking Stage Fright. Stage Fright is just one of those movies that I think everybody should see at least once. Well, one of the horror films. One of the films that I say horror fans should at least, every horror fan should at least see this film once, because it's a really good movie. It's a legitimately great film. The director went on to make a movie called The Church, which I didn't love, but I thought The Church was a fairly interesting film. I think this director's masterpiece most definitely is Stage Fright. That's really it. That's all I have to say about Stage Fright. On to the next one.
The story of an American family who lost everything except the will to survive. Murdered, raped, burned, but not beaten.
Okay, number 3, we're in the home stretch, is Lucio Fulci's Cat in the Brain. Now, if there's one Lucio Fulci film that I think doesn't get enough credit, it's Cat in the Brain. Cat in the Brain is a legitimately funny horror comedy. It's a legitimately stomach-churning gore film. The gore scenes in this film are surprisingly, like, violent and gross and stomach-churning. Even if you've seen most of Lucio Fulci's movies, I would argue this is his most violent film. Essentially, the film stars Lucio Fulci as himself, and he's starting to have these weird hallucinations, seeing murderers everywhere, and he believes it's because he's working on these very violent horror films. He goes to see a psychiatrist about this, and the psychiatrist hypnotizes him into thinking he's committing these murders based off these films when really the murderous psychiatrist is committing these murders. There's a twist at the end that is kind of expected, but at the same time not, and honestly it's satisfying enough. I would say if I have one problem with this film, it's maybe the fact that some of the scenes with the hallucinations can get a little too loud and annoying, and the fact that, like, the conflict is resolved, like, just way too quickly, and it just kind of ruins the whole build-up of the film. Other than that, I think it's Fulci's masterpiece, and it really is an amazing, amazing film. I went to a screening of this film last summer, actually, and it was a very small, in a very, very small room. Like, there was maybe a maximum of 12 seats, and I luckily was able to get tickets. And it was great, honestly, to see, you know, Cat in the Brain on the big screen. It was great because the crowd I was with were people who had seen the film before, they were fans of the film before, they were fans of Fulci, and they knew all the right places to laugh at, they knew all the right places to, like, giggle at if the effects weren't too good or they were a little cheesy or the dubbing was cheesy. They knew how to enjoy the film. And that is one of my favorite experiences at the cinema, seeing Cat in the Brain. Definitely. But, on to number 2.
Show you a few of the tricks I perform in the Wizard of Gore.
At number 2, we have the William Lustig masterpiece starring Joe Spinell, Maniac. Maniac is a legitimately misunderstood film. A lot of people, when they saw it, when it came out in the 80s, said it was this immensely misogynistic film without any depth or kind of purpose or character. It was just violence against women for the sake of violence against women. And you could see it that way. You really could. But Maniac is, in my opinion, a film similar to Psycho, how it is very much about a killer who had a lot of issues with his mother, and because of those issues, he has become a serial killer. Very similar to, again, Psycho, as well as Don't Go in the House. But I think Maniac is the best of these films. Better than Psycho, better than Maniac, better than Peeping Tom, which Peeping Tom, I feel like, had a little bit of that kind of, not mother, but his father kind of abused him. But still, Maniac is kind of a heartbreaking, harrowing film, essentially about a very lonely guy who had a fucked up life, and he kind of uses all his pent-up rage against his mother and against all the horrible things that have happened to him to kill people. It's definitely a violent film. It's definitely, you know, a little misogynistic, but it's kind of a heartbreaking story. I mean, the killer himself, Frank, isn't that, I don't want to say that bad of a guy, but he isn't like Jason or Freddy or any of the other popular slashers of the 80s, where they were like just mindless killers and people liked them because they were badass. Frank is a character who is human. He's 100% human. Some of the things he does may be inhumane, but he is a very human character. And the film is, I would argue, very much a character study. But I'm kind of dragging along here. Essentially, Maniac's about a guy, fucked up childhood, like I said. He goes around scalping women and putting the scalps on mannequins, and he believes these mannequins talk to him. And he falls in love with this woman who happens to be a photographer. The film was remade in 2012, where Elijah Wood portrayed Frank, and Elijah Wood did a fantastic job in the film. I really liked the remake as well. It's not as good as the original. I love the original. It has this very dirty grindhouse feel. The effects for the film were done by Tom Savini, the man who's known as the Wizard of Gore. He has done the effects for Friday the 13th, the effects for The Burning, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. He did the effects for a lot of movies, and he's a great effects man. And his effects are great in this film. Maniac is a fantastic film, and I don't know what else to say about it. It's just a film I think is great. So, with that out of the way, let's get on to the number one spot, which might be kind of predictable, but let's go.
The table is set, and the festivities have begun. Unfortunately, a few uninvited guests have come.
At the number one spot, my favorite slasher film of all time is My Bloody Valentine, the original from the 80s. My Bloody Valentine was a film that combines the atmosphere and creepiness of films like Halloween and Black Christmas with the visceral violence and gore of Friday the 13th and The Burning and Maniac. It's a legitimately stomach-churning gore film. I mean, the most kind of, not like the goriest film ever made, I should say. And I think dedicated gorehounds won't find it to be that gory. But going into it myself for the first time a few years back, after kind of never really seeing it, and watching it, I was genuinely surprised with some of the gore scenes, and how visceral and how gory some of the scenes were. I don't know why I absolutely love My Bloody Valentine so much. I really don't. My reason for it is just, it's creepy, it's violent, it's interesting, the killer is interesting, it has a cool kind of twist to it, and I really don't know what else to say about it. I love My Bloody Valentine so much. So much. I'm kind of heartbroken we never got a sequel, and I do think it sucks that because of the kind of crackdown on violence in media, violence in violence in film due to the death of John Lennon. The crackdown on violence due to his death, essentially cut the film to pieces and kind of ruined it. I would say My Bloody Valentine is a film that is nothing without its explicit gore scenes. Without them, it's just a kind of typical run-of-the-mill, slasher film that's kind of like Halloween. It doesn't have anything that really sets it apart. I mean, you could go ahead and say every day of the week that Friday the 13th is a very violent movie, and indeed the Friday the 13th films are pretty violent, but they aren't atmospheric, they aren't scary, they aren't creepy. My Bloody Valentine is a film that achieves all of this and more. In spades, I might add. I love this film. I know I've said it like 3 times already. I'm sure I've repeated myself on a lot of fucking things. So I'm just going to kind of stop now and say, if you made it this far into the video, I gotta salute you for it, because this video is probably going to be pretty long. But anyway guys, this is Biscaboo, Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.